If you're looking for ways to improve your score in the OET speaking test, then one way you can do this is to make sure you're asking the right questions at the right time. How can you do this? Well, keep watching for a full explanation with examples and top tips. Hi there everyone, and welcome back to another OET video from Swoosh English. My name is Grace and I will be your expert OET teacher for today. Now, in the OET role play as the healthcare professional, it is your job to steer the conversation by asking questions. Now, the bullet points on your role card will help guide you through this, but do you know the two types of questions that you should be asking and when it's appropriate to use them? Well, keep watching this video for a full explanation. So the two types of questions I'd like to talk about today are open and closed. Let's start with open questions. Now, open questions are questions that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no response. They begin with a question word such as who, what, where, why, when, or how, and they require a more detailed explanation or response from the patient. Now let's take a look at why exactly it's useful to use open questions in the role play. So why should we use open questions in the OET speaking test? Well, firstly, to gather information, and this might help you to gather information such as the symptoms that the patient's experiencing or daily routines that are relevant to their situation. They could be used to clarify or follow up on additional information and get more detail from the patient. It allows the patient to offer their opinions and sentiments on their condition, so to really open up and give their own feelings on the situation, and offers more accurate information and actionable insight for you as the health professional. Finally, it helps to create a dialogue and also build rapport whilst allowing the professional to still steer the conversation, so you can get the information that you need from the patient, but also build rapport, allow them to open up to you and give them the details that they feel are important and gather information that you need. So now we've talked about what open questions are, let's take a look at these examples. We've got, how would you describe your pain? What symptoms have you been experiencing? How do you feel about the suggested treatment? What are you currently doing to alleviate your symptoms? So you can see that questions such as these allow the patient to really elaborate and give you a range of information that they want to provide. Now that you've seen some examples of open questions, I'd like you to see if you can think of any more and then write them in the comments below. So let's get a nice long list going in the comments of open questions. You never know, you might help out a fellow OET candidate. So now let's talk about closed questions. In contrast to open questions, closed questions only require the patient to give a yes or no answer or choose from a set of distinct predefined options. These types of questions do not require the patient to give a long response. So let's take a look now and see why you might want to use closed questions in the role play. So why use closed questions? Firstly, they can be used to gather specific information from the patient, to check that the patient has understood the information that you've provided, so by simply giving a yes or no answer as to whether the information was clear, and to clarify details from the patient. So once they've given you some broad information, you might want to refine or clarify some details that they've given you. Now let's take a look at some examples. We've got, have you experienced these symptoms before? Has the pain stopped you from exercising? Does this answer your question? Are you still working? So you can see that all of these questions only require a very short yes or no answer. Now that we've looked at examples, I would like you once again to think of your own examples. So examples of closed questions that you might use in an OET roleplay. Put them in the comments and let's get a nice long list going. Now's the chance for you to apply what you've learnt by looking at a real OET role card and thinking of questions that you could ask if you were doing this particular roleplay. So I'm going to show you the task card and we're going to talk about questions that you might use. open questions, closed questions, and how this will help you to achieve the tasks on the given role card. So let's take a look at that now. Here is your role card then. You can see that this is a role card for a doctor. We've got the setting, we've got a little bit of context, and then we have our task with our bullet points. Now, the bullet point that I would like to focus on right now is this first one. Find out the patient's current symptoms and their duration. Find out if the parent has treated him at home. Now, I'd love for you to have a little go at this, so take a moment now to pause the video, study this role card, and write a list of open and closed questions that you would use to complete that first bullet point. Once you've done that, move on. I'm going to show you some of my own examples. Okay, how did everybody get on? Hopefully you had a go at this yourself. Now, we will all have different answers, of course, but here are some example questions that I wrote down. So as you can see, I start off with a few open questions just to get some general idea about what the situation is, and then to get more detailed responses, I move on to closed questions. So if you had something that looks a bit like this, then you are definitely on the right track to asking the right questions and succeeding in your OET roleplay. Now, we've talked a lot about the types of questions that you should be asking in your OET speaking test, but what about the questions that you absolutely should not ask? Well, I'm now going to finish this video by giving you 3 question types that you should avoid using in your OET roleplay. The first one is compound questions. This is when you insert 2 questions into one. For example, have you felt any shortness of breath or felt dizzy during these episodes? Okay, so I'm asking the patient about 2 things, shortness of breath and feeling dizzy. This is a compound question and you want to avoid this. The reason for that is that it creates some confusion and it disrupts the flow of the role play because it might result in your patient only answering one part of the question, in which case you would then need to repeat the second question again. So you definitely want to avoid compound questions. The next type of question to avoid is a leading question. This is a question where you are kind of leading the patient to give you a certain response. For example, you've put on weight recently, haven't you? Now that use of a question tag, haven't you? That does lead the patient to a certain answer. Now, it might lead to an inaccurate response from the patient because it might not be true, but they feel as if they can't really contradict you. So absolutely avoid any kind of leading questions such as, you've put on weight, haven't you? Avoid those question tags. The final question type to avoid is any inappropriate closed question that could come across as aggressive or rude, especially when you're checking that the patient has understood some information. For example, do you understand? Am I being clear? While this may be meant well because you just want to check the patient has understood, these are quite aggressive and can be perceived as rude. So instead, try asking them something like, is everything clear up until now? Or do you have any questions up until this point? So questions like that, you're still asking if the patient has understood, but you're not asking it in an inappropriate or rude way. So thanks for joining me for this video, everyone. I do hope that you found it useful. And remember that if you want to practice your open and closed questions in an OET roleplay environment, why not join our OET mock speaking classes with a Swoosh English course? So you can take these classes in a group with other classmates, practice with your peers, give each other feedback and get feedback from the teacher. Or if you're looking for more one-on-one support, why not book a private mock speaking session with one of our expert teachers to get dedicated, personalized feedback on your use of questions and all of the other aspects of your OET speaking performance. If you're looking for this kind of support, head on over to our website, www.swooshenglish.com, and take a look at the courses that Swoosh English can offer you. Thanks so much for joining me, everybody, and I will see you very soon. Happy studying.